Hi, welcome. We're at Rick's house here in Ramsey. My name is Brian Croker. I'm the president of Little Rock Printing. This is my dad, Rick Croker. He's the founder of Little Rock Printing. Today we wanted to document our story a bit. We've been around since 1994, and we thought video would be a cool way to, would be a good format to kind of tell the history of how we started and give a bit of about us and document it that way. And I think there's some kind of funny stories and good stories along the way. So we'll get right into it. And Rick, why don't you, before you get into telling us how the business started, kind of lead us up to a bit of your work experience and then how that led into 1994 deciding to start what was Little Rock Drafting Services at that time.
Okay. Drafting has always been my passion from high school. I was fortunate to get a job right out of high school with Golder Associates in Toronto as a draftsman, and then moved to Victoria and back to Calgary, and noticed that there was a Golder Associates here, and I started working as a draftsman here.
What year was that?
That was 1976.
Yeah.
74 when I first started working in Toronto. And 76, after we got married, we moved to Calgary and started working for Golder again as a draftsman. And we were just starting to get into the business of putting color into our reports. So we get the odd picture, and some of the figures were occasionally get splashed with a bit of red or some kind of color. And that sort of developed, over the years. And by 1994, we were sending a lot of work to print shops around Calgary, and waiting a day or two to get our prints back. And putting a report out took a few days. And I was looking at how much we were spending and trying to get the company to invest in some color equipment so that we'd have it right on site and we could take the timeline down a bit.
This is Golder.
The Golder.
Selling Golder to buy a machine.
Mm-hmm. And it was still quite an investment, and they were hesitant of technology that wasn't core to their business, so fair enough. And basically one day after I'd sent a bunch of work to my buddies at Riley's, I got frustrated, and I said, look, if you guys aren't going to buy color equipment, why don't I buy something? And you can just buy color copies from me. So I don't know what day that was, but the next day, you got to be careful what you ask for, because
This is in 1994.
94.
Okay.
Got to be careful what you ask for, because they called my bluff.
Yeah.
So the very next day, I was out shopping for color print equipment. I ended up with a screaming fast 4-page-a-minute color machine with an electronic rip. And at the time, I think it was worth about half of my house.
Hold on a second. Why? I think at this point you were contracting, right? Like, were you an employee at Golder at this time?
Yeah, I'd been an employee.
What were you doing at that time? You were doing drafting for yourself. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit
Sure.
about the economic situation in Calgary in '94 and why you wound up kind of contracting your drafting services and working at Golder?
Yeah, there's a bit of evolution there that I would have missed. And I was drafting, but I was drafting on contract. We just merged with another company downtown, and there was some duplication, so I was duplicated. And sort of long story short, I put myself on hourly so that I would be paid when I worked and not paid when I didn't.
And if I remember the story correct, it was do you remember how much you were making at that time?
Probably around 40 grand a year.
So it was $20 an hour.
$20 an hour, yeah.
So your consulting rate, you told Golder that they could pay you just your hourly wage as your consulting rate. Is that right, or did you have a markup on that wage?
No, my wage was my wage.
So instead of being a $20 an hour, 8-hour a day employee, you told them, pay me 20 hours a day for the hours I work.
$20 an hour.
Yeah, but let me sell drafting services to other people.
Yeah, I ended up, it was pretty tough times there wasn't very much work going on in Calgary. But I looked for other engineering companies that might need draftsmen like myself, and found a couple of small contracts here and there. And so I was working, and basically that was the other part of the deal from Golder. They would let me use, my computer and the space,
Yep.
and I'd work for other people and have whatever rate I wanted to charge them.
Right. So you were consulting on your own instead of getting laid off, but you're working inside Golder Space, and then that's when you decided. That's when you bluffed to Golder that they should buy their machine, and of course they didn't want to spend the money, so you did,
Yeah.
and that was the leap of faith you took. Some of these stories I've heard before, we haven't actually formally talked about them all the time. Is it true that Mom was not there when you signed for the Xerox machine?
She was visiting in Victoria, and I guess after this incident, she started taking the checkbook with her when she went out of town. But she was in Victoria. While she was in Victoria, I committed to $20,000 worth of Xerox equipment.
Yeah.
So I kind of I snuck it in there.
And was the machine? So the machine was obviously 94. They moved really slow. They said 8 pages a minute, but when they ripped a file, it would take
Actually, 4 pages a minute.
4 pages a minute.
Yeah, I would take paper and wrap it on a drum and go around once for every color.
Yeah.
And then shoot it out the other side. And if it was duplex, you had to feed it through again.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I guess tell me a bit about when you talked about it earlier. For us now, our shop does about, just do some context, our shop does about 100 print orders a day and about 1 million pages a month in the shop. You were telling me a story about Cameco,
Yeah.
about an order you got from one of your, because when you first started doing the printing for Golder, was it enough money just from Golder to make money to pay for the machine?
No, not hardly. I'd try and sell to the other companies I was drafting for as well. And out of the blue came a job from Cameco. I'm not sure. I think it was for my contacts at Golder. And it was a massive order. It was, I think it was 2,000 11/17s. So if I could do 4 pages a minute on 8.5 11, that's 2 pages a minute on 11/17.
Yeah.
So you do the math. And it's
What were you selling 1/17s for? Is it?
It's over $1. I think it was like $1.19,
Yeah.
$1.29 maybe.
Yeah. So $3,000 job.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more than my salary.
Yeah.
It was 2,000 sheets of paper, and it was such a massive job. I hired somebody to come in and do the folding as they came off the printer.
Was that Ian or is that?
No, that was Jake.
Oh, Ken and Jake.
My cousin's wife.
Okay.
Yeah, bit of an artist, so I thought she'd be able to fold straight.
Yeah. Good. So that's kind of how we start. That's how it started. So the drafting, obviously. So '94, you instead of being laid off, essentially you started contracting drafting, and then got the color photocopier the same year.
Yeah.
Selling prints to Golder, and so now you're selling drafting and printing to other engineering firms in Golder, mostly Golder,
And a plot.
and about a paper plotter.
Yeah.
How long from '94 on did you continue drafting? When would you say the last time you sold drafting was?
Not very long, probably 96.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's because the printing was making more money, or was there
No, that's
drafting?
because at Golder my role changed. I ended up going back full time.
They hired you back,
Back full time, and I became an associate.
and you never left the facility. So just
No,
so
it's-
people know,
yeah.
from '94 to about 2001, Little Rock Printing was just a desk and some print equipment on one of the floors.
Yeah, I started out in '94. I was just sort of tucked in at the back of the drafting department. And whenever there's a copy to do, I go over to the back corner and copy.
Yeah.
A lot of the copies were onesie twosie.
Yeah.
5 at a time. Maybe that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. 10, 20.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a good time before we jump into you going back to Golder. Tell me about your first logo.
Oh yeah. Well, you'd remember that because I didn't have a logo yet. I sort of had an idea, but Brian was 12.
10 and 94.
10, yeah, he was 10. And he came in, I think it was Christmas, maybe?
I think it was Christmas.
Yeah. And Brian gave me as a Christmas present on a piece of scrap coroplast. He Sharpied out, or I don't think Sharpies were around yet.
Mr. Sketch.
Mr. Sketch,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Sharpie
the smelly ones.
made me a new logo.
Yeah.
So it was a little rock, a big L, a little down the stem and rock down the horizontal part.
Yeah.
And then there was kind of a lump on top of the L,
A rock.
a rock.
Yeah.
And then there was an R with the tail, like the front tail of the R resting on the rock.
So you still have it, right?
Yeah, I still got that Christmas present.
Okay,
Yeah, I do.
I'll post a photo of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was our first logo, and we went with that for a few years.
I think 90, so the late 90s.
Wait, it said Little Rock Color Copies.
I think the board entry says drafting services.
It did too, yeah.
So 94 to 96, you're doing this, and then 96 you get hired back to Golder, and then in 1999 you went back to school. So now you're you're sitting at your desk printing photocopies, and you're working at Golder as an office administrator, or what was the job title?
I was an admin supervisor, I guess.
Kind of handling
Yeah,
operation stuff.
handling the operations for the Calgary office.
Yeah.
All the word processors and receptionists.
Yeah, couriers.
Yeah, any of the contracts and phone contracts and all the expendables.
Yeah. So 99, you went back to get your MBA at the University of Calgary, executive MBA, and so what made you want to do that, and what happened to the business from 99 to 2001?
Yeah, 99, I was an associate at Golder, but I was probably only the first or second that had become an associate without at least an undergrad degree. So I had
Because you had just a high school diploma.
I had a really good high school diploma, but that was not post-secondary. So I'd always felt probably a little inadequate,
Yeah.
or inadequately educated.
Office full of engineers.
Yeah. So I don't. It occurred to me to go back to school to remedy that situation, and I thought probably the degree would give me credibility,
Yep.
but all amongst my peers and people I worked with at Golder,
Yep.
but also might give me some. An MBA might give me some tools to make better business decisions.
Yeah.
So I went back for the executive MBA. So that was every week, every second week,
Yeah.
weekend, and then it was about, I put myself on 30 hours a week at Golder, and worked, I don't know how many hours it was for school. It was probably 40 or 50.
Yeah. So it was 99 then when Mom started working for Little Rock.
99 with me working job and school. Pretty much Carla did everything there was to do with Little Rock.
Yeah. Just down the hall, if I remember right. Like,
Yeah.
Mom was
Yeah.
in the corner with the photocopier,
Mhm.
and you were just down the hall with an office on the 9th floor.
Yeah,
Place
that's
96.
right. Yeah, she basically had a rolling chair,
Yeah.
and I think we had an old steno desk, about the size of like 3 TV trays.
Yeah.
And that was, her computer was beside that, and next to the printer. By then we'd had 2 printers.
Yeah.
I'd gotten this 6-page-a-minute screamer.
Yeah.
So I had a 4-page-a-minute, and the fast one was 6-page-a-minute. And that was our fleet. And I think, I can't remember the model, but an HP roll plotter.
Yeah. I remember I would work sometimes in the summer and around that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it worked was essentially there was the printing, like Mom set up in the corner, and then there's a big open workspace with all the draftsmen and Golder.
Yep.
And essentially they would order, they had the drivers loaded on the computers to print from AutoCAD the color for a report.
Yep.
And then so we would get them populated, and then 1 to 10 pages would come out, test prints or copies of report, and then you'd rip them, print them, and you'd walk over to your desk,
Yep.
color photocopy.
Free
and
delivery.
then we'd read and then we'd write it down and bill them at the end of the month.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and then also at that time, around 99, we went back to school is when we started doing geological strip logs. So, you were a well site geologist, so that's kind of your background into kind of knowing that world. So, was it Brent? Or, so we print well site geologist reports. Everybody doesn't know that's, the report's obvious, that's just needed by the report, but a geological strip log is, well, I'll let you talk to it, but it's essentially a long folded plot to scale of what's down a well before an oil company decides to drill.
From 79 to 84, I felt the call of the wild and went and worked on the rigs as a mud logger, and then became a certified geologist just by exposure. You can't do that anymore. You actually need to go to school for that. But I'd hand draw, so this was my drafting and play, hand draw the strip log, and Leroy in all the lettering. And we had...
what does Leroy in mean?
Leroy's a mechanical lettering set.
Oh.
So the lettering was nice and sharp and consistent.
Okay.
Could have done it by hand too, but just trying to be up a notch.
Yeah.
And we were drilling pretty slow those days. A well would take 3 to 6 months or more. So I had lots of time. Drew a strip log and exposed it with a blueprint machine, and had a tube with a ammonia bucket, and developed prints right on the rig, and set those in at the end of the well for hand colored.
Yeah.
So
That's what you sent to the oil company.
yeah, that was like I left in 84 when you were born.
Yeah.
And 15 years later, I hadn't thought about the industry for that long. A buddy of mine, Red Boyd, was working at RPS, which was Tacoma Mudlog.
Yeah.
Tacoma Logging at the time.
Yeah.
And they were just Tacoma Consulting, sorry.
Yeah.
They were just a block away. And
Now we're back to 99.
Now we're back to 99.
Yeah.
He called me over. He'd had a printing problem with a plotter, so I have a plotter. I thought, well, maybe I'll come over and see what I can do. I believe I solved their plotter problem, but my eyes were open because I realized all of a sudden, like a flash in 15 years, it had gone from developing blueprints in a tube to totally automated software.
Yeah.
So these guys were out there doing well site geology and entering it into a computer program.
What's the software?
It's still around, and it's called Well Site Systems.
Well site system. Yeah. And there's some other ones, but that's
There are a couple more into it. All the major ones are in Calgary.
yeah. So
And
well site systems.
Yeah, I managed to solve their problem, but I was looking at the print process, and I think they had whatever geologist was in town and not working, they would have him run the plotter. So, you know, they had to learn and relearn the process every time. So I asked Bob Dick, my buddy at Tacoma, would you mind if I came up with a process for plotting? Which I did. I hired a developer, and we came up with a routine that printed into strip logs.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Tacoma, and they became my first well site client.
Yeah.
And then I became friends with Well Site Systems.
Yeah.
To Matt Wallace.
Phil was there.
And Phil Jones.
Phil was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they
They
started.
were like on our block, weren't they?
Yeah, everything.
Both were a block away.
Yeah, it's odd. Like the largest software company in the world at the time for that industry was a block away, and the largest stable of well-site geologists was a block the other way.
Yeah.
So it was
Perfect
quite,
storm.
yeah, it was serendipity.
Yeah.
And the fact that I had a history in
Yeah.
this background. So we started banging out strip logs really slow,
Yeah.
because the process I first invented was a lot of manual steps. And later on it became a lot faster than that. But we just started that when I went to school, and that added complexity, like a level of work to Carla, who had to manage all that
Yeah.
throughput while I was sort of bringing an apple to the teacher.
Back to school.
Yeah.
You got a full-time job in Golder.
Yeah.
So you get your MBA, and let's fast forward to 2001 now. So I remember that it wasn't the easiest decision whether to either keep kind of mom just doing well site geology and some color copies for Golder. We might have been in the mailroom at that point.
We were.
So we moved into the mailroom where they had the black and white. So Golder still did the black and white printing themselves, and we just did the color printing. And then we had the well site geology printing,
Yep.
and some plotting and some other clients, some color photocopying too. And now you're an MBA, you're an office manager at a booming Golder at this time, 2001. That was they were taking over a new floor every year at Place 96 at that time.
First of all, I want to say
Sure.
my education was 2 years, but it wasn't 2 years. It spanned 2 millennia, 99 to 2001. So
Yeah.
it was really, and
Two
that's how long it
centuries.
felt. Yeah. Okay, go on.
That's an important detail.
Yeah.
So Sean McEwen.
Yeah.
So it tells. So you had a fork in the road. I remember you debating because you're at the point now where you could become a principal at Golder. They'll give you a car, pretty stable job,
Yeah.
pretty well-paying job.
Well, I had a car
Oh,
allowance
okay.
already.
But there were some perks coming up.
Yeah.
So you had the tough decision to make, and then tell me a bit about what Sean McEwen's role was at that time, and then how your conversation went when you told him
Yeah.
you were debating between staying at Golder or figuring something out at Little Rock.
Sean McEwen was the office manager at the time, and I was an associate with a brand new MBA degree, and a company that was sort of busting at the seams trying to print more,
Yeah.
and Golder busting at the seams trying to do more engineering,
Yeah.
and raise time at Golder. And I don't know what it was, what the raises were, but it was a pretty prolific year for money.
Everyone was getting raises.
Everyone was getting big raises, so Sean and I went to lunch.
And you just finished your MBA.
I finished my MBA,
Yeah.
and I was looking at the two horizons, which way to go. And Sean always has a way of making a decision easy.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there talking, and partway through lunch, he said, "Rick, the raises this year are for associates are between $5,000 and $15,000 a year."
Yeah.
So he says, "Here's your 5." So I get $5,000 raise, and he says, "I'm guessing you can make more money in maybe like a print shop or something." So the conversation wasn't very long, but it was fairly decisive.
Yeah.
In that, mutually decisive what my role should be at Golder, and that should be as a supplier,
Yeah.
and not a supplier and having a role as an associate.
Yeah.
So I refer to that conversation as the day that Sean quit me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So now we're going to. That's where you take the leap of faith and not have a stable job, like not to have the business job and the side business. Now it's time to take a leap of faith. So we wound up moving downstairs at Place 96 because we had to move out of. We had to move out of Golder and kind of become big boys and have our own lease and our own space and our own actual home business at this point.
Yeah.
And this is 2002, I guess. 2001, 2002. Okay. And so we wound up taking the space downstairs as our first official shop in the Golder building. Tell me about how, I think it's an interesting story, tell me how big the space was and how the lease negotiations went to acquire that space.
Yeah. Filling in Tim down. Filling in Tim down had owned the building and sold it to Bentall.
Yeah.
Tim Down was a bit of a cowboy, and we're used to dealing fairly shoot from the hip level for.
Because you had
for
negotiated
leases.
the gold release with Dave Horsfield.
With Dave Horsfield, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it for like $5 a foot.
So you knew what the whole building was going for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was quite familiar with the value of the building.
Yeah.
So dealing with Bentall, and there was a space on the main floor that had been occupied for a long time.
Yeah. There used to be an Apple store, I think.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It still had all the colors across the top.
6 colors.
Yeah. I just wanted. We were in 300 square feet upstairs.
Yeah.
So all I wanted was 12 or 1,400 square feet. This space was almost 3,000. So I way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. So and the part I wanted was the front that was right by the lobby.
Yeah.
And so that you could access it from inside.
Yeah.
And that's the part I talked to them about. I just want this 1,500 feet back to the sort of divider.
Yeah.
And they really wanted to rent the space because they wouldn't be able to rent it. Sort of chopped up area at the back
Yeah.
to somebody else.
You have to access it from the alley.
You'd have to go outside. Yeah. Access train there.
Yeah.
So they wanted $12 a square foot.
Yeah.
For 2,913 square feet.
Yeah.
And I just wanted half.
Yeah.
So we ended up at, okay, we're gonna give you the whole space. You can have all 2,900 feet.
Yeah.
And we're gonna charge you $12 a square foot.
Yeah.
But for only the first 5 months of every year. So January through July, we paid rent, and then through
August.
through May really,
Yeah.
we paid rent, and then June through the end of the year, we paid nothing. And then we did that for 5 years.
So essentially $5 a square foot.
$5 a square foot was the net rent plus operating costs.
That's a 5-year lease.
5 years.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's less than we pay now.
A lot less.
That's good. I remember because you got the space and you're very modest, and so 2002 is when I started working for this. Right when I started
Yeah.
kind of working. I just graduated high school as well that year, and you bought these dividers from Ducky's to block the halfway point because you didn't want people to think you were really rich.
It looked like an extravagance of space.
Yeah, it did.
But
We go from 300 in a mailroom to 3,000
Yeah, it
downstairs.
was basically running out of a closet or
Yeah.
like part of a mailroom.
Yeah.
To have 3,000 square feet was okay. What are these guys charging?
Yeah. And
So-
then it wasn't long before we had the space overfilled.
well, you put one piece back there, and then all of a sudden it's full.
Yeah. So early 2000s, so the business started Little Rock Drafting Services, that was obvious. And then it became Little Rock Color Copies because essentially you stopped drafting and you and Mom were selling color photocopies to Golder and other engineering firms.
Yeah.
And then around the 2000 mark, early 2000s, maybe late 90s, Golder had a bit of a shift. They hired John Gully, I believe he told me, to come over he was an expert in oil sands development consulting, which meant that Little Rock inadvertently became a leader in printing first just the color for these binders, which was, there'd be more in a month than a whole year just for these giant binders for like Curl Oil Sands and some of these bigger places. So then we changed the name to Little Rock Document Services because essentially we were printing just documents. We were printing reports for engineering companies. We were printing just the whole report, black and white and color. So tell me a bit about how we got into the document services, into the report production, and what made us really good at that. Because And also, how many of these reports have we printed since the 2000s?
John Gully actually came over to Golder in '96.
96, okay.
Yeah, and the first job was a Suncor job, Steep Bank Mine,
Yeah.
and it just kept coming.
Yeah.
There was one after the other.
Yeah.
And yes, so at the beginning we just did the color,
Yeah.
and eventually in the early 2000s we started doing the black.
Hand fold all the other by 17s.
Yeah. Or take them to a print shop.
Like where?
West Canadian was really close.
So you print them and get them folded.
Print them and take them there to fold them,
And Kinko's,
Kinko's.
because we did 3-hole paper or something.
yeah, there was.
Oh, they drilled them for us.
Yeah.
Because our cannon didn't punch.
Took them to Kinko's until they took an entire box full of print, which
Yeah.
was I don't know how many, a couple of days worth of print,
Yeah.
and they folded them backwards.
Yeah.
So I think that was the last time I used them. As you know, they went out of business. So
Yeah. Well, Canada.
yeah.
So,
where was I?
so we started John Gully and getting into printing more and more binders.
Yeah. Well, the name drafting at the beginning was changed to colored copies because it was an evolution. I wasn't drafting anymore, so it was misrepresented. And again, when we went from colored copies and started doing all PDF work for EIAs,
Yeah.
uh,
Environmental impact
yeah, that had
assessments.
nothing. Yeah, that had nothing to do with printing. So, but it was to do with documents. So that's why we morphed the name into Document Services.
Yeah. How many of these binders do you think we printed?
Well, I keep passwords on all of them.
Yeah.
And we're at, on that spreadsheet, we're at line 350.
So 350 applications.
Yeah, applications, SIRs, updates.
Yeah.
You know, with all the different iterations of all the applications, we've done 350.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Pipelines, oil sand development.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a really interesting story from, we did one from, so we used to get them from Golder, and then we started getting them from Matrix. They were kind of starting off in the early 2000s. So those two were giving us lots, but we'd also get some directly from some of the oil companies. And I believe Petro-Canada was giving us big applications in the early 2000s. And there was one particular one, do you remember which one during the, do you remember what it was?
I know it was Donna Yaskew, and I think it was Meadow Lake.
Meadow Lake. So the G7 or G8 or G10, whatever it would have been at the time,
G8, yeah.
G8 was coming to Calgary in 2002. Or
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, I'm not sure the date.
and of course there was a, not people remember because nothing happened, but there was going to be something in Banff and then something in Calgary, and there was concern that there would be a riot in downtown Calgary or some sort of demonstration that would close downtown Calgary. And we're downtown Calgary, Petro-Canada's downtown Calgary, and the binder is going to be due, like it needs to be printed right in that wheelhouse. So they obviously had, tell us about their apprehensions and what you did to, I guess, keep the work and be able to and ease their apprehensions about that.
Yeah, we were right in the middle of printing their EIA.
Yeah.
So we had copiers going like more than 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Overnight when we could stay awake.
Yeah.
And if they had shut down downtown, it would have been a complete lockdown, no traffic. So I had this old RV cot,
Yeah.
and I took it to an empty office we had. Like we were sort of sub-renting from the landlord. Well, just basically.
Well, the third floor was empty and Golden was going to be taking it.
They were going to be taking it, and this was a friendly landlord, and we just had some stuff on that floor.
Yeah.
And I took one of the offices and put my cot in there, and I lived there.
For how long?
I think it was 3 days.
3 days, 3 nights.
2 nights.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Golder had a set of showers on the ninth
Yeah.
floor, so I could, keep myself healthy
Yeah.
by using the Golder shower
Yeah.
and running our printing on the third floor.
Yeah.
So I never left downtown for 3 days.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's a good story. So we did the binders. So we had we were talking a bit about kind of the ups and downs. Like you said, you used other print companies. Like as you're growing, we still use other print companies for certain things. Other print companies use us. You just can't do everything all the time. But tell me a bit about some. I remember we had a big potential new client. At this time, Golder is 85% of our business, right? 85-90% of our business.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
So you know that, and these days nobody's more than 5% of our business, but which is nice. The big accounts are great, but you can't be so vulnerable. And you knew back then that we couldn't live forever with one customer being all of our work.
Right.
So we had the opportunity to. This guy wanted to do these hunting maps. And we went a long way down the road, invested a bunch of equipment, and then inadvertently we wound up losing to, I think, West Canada on that.
Yep.
Maybe walk us through that story about
Yeah.
the highs and lows.
This
of that.
is one of those business-wise a lesson on tail wagging the dog.
Right.
We were trying really hard to please a particular client or a potential client, because all we didn't do
Never
was
paid us
check
anything,
prints
yeah.
to this point and samples. I don't know that we actually ever built anything yet, or it's all free. But we had, and then in the process, like the equipment that we had still wasn't quite giving the result
Yeah.
that he was looking for. And we took it to files to Xerox and had some output on some newer equipment, and that seemed to do the trick.
Yeah.
So we had, on the strength that we were going to get the amount of work we were going to get from this fellow, we committed to a lease, like a trading out of the equipment we had, and a lease of 3. And the model was 3535.
Yeah.
The 35 page a minute color. So
Yeah.
over 100 page a minute
Yeah.
total. And he walked away.
Yeah.
He decided there was still yet something else that he was looking for in the output.
Yeah.
So that was a really good lesson for me.
Yeah.
Definitely pay attention to your customer, but don't let them run your show.
Yeah. Worked out well because we use those for
Yeah,
all
we
around
ran
the work.
We ran them pretty hard.
So that's actually really interesting because so a lot of these early years we were really small like print company, essentially a document printing company. So we went from the 3535s, and then I think a couple years later we bought the Xerox 5000, which is a their light medium production engine, right? So now we're actually into before that we bought the 260 and the 60s, the Ricoh 5560 or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know which color. Because we had a really good black and white fleet,
Mm-hmm.
and our color fleet was okay. And we got the 3535s.
Yep.
Then we bought the Ricoh 5560 and the Xerox 250,
Yeah.
which became their 550 and whatever. That's
Yeah.
a C60. And we ran them head to head. And that's about the time I was working in the business this time. That's when we started trying to sell booklets and postcards, and we bought a cutter in the back. And then we jumped to the 5000, which is like, because the Xerox turned out to be more reliable than the Ricoh at that point.
For color, it was hands down.
Yeah, so it was better for booklets and for reports. Easy to operate. This is 2004-ish, I think. And bought the 5000, which was like the next step up. But then, I think what's interesting, so we moved in 2008, and we bought a Xerox iGen 4, which is, it was $1 million.
Just under $1 million.
Yeah, so $1 million photocopier, which is essentially, and the 5000 was worth like 80 grand or something.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a huge jump, and even Xerox today talks about what a jump we took on that. Essentially, what we did is we took all the profits we were taking from binders and invested it in the commercial print business, and that kind of lost money for a bunch of years, but it was okay because we were growing our business. But talk to me a bit about why you would decide to make such a big jump in equipment. We were making a lot of money at that time. So you could have kept a lot of that.
Sure. And I think we've typically shared at least as much or more than we've kept, and we've rolled it into a number of things, including wages,
Yeah.
benefits, bonuses, equipment,
Yeah.
and space.
Yeah.
And but I always fall back on what is going to give me what result would I be happy with.
Yeah.
And that was a big leap. We could have taken some smaller steps in between it. But, you know, based on projections, yeah, they were back of an envelope, but
Yeah.
based on projections, we needed some horsepower that wasn't going to see us changing technology every 2 years.
Yeah.
We needed something that would, you know, manage the workload for, you know, like maybe 4 or 5.
And I think, like, looking where we're at now, that hunting map story is interesting to me because all the equipment we buy now is always whatever the best in class is of that. Either we need it and we buy the best of it, or we don't buy it at all. You know, like, I think that still sticks with us, that pain of that little hunting map job, which he's obviously not, I'm sure that's just you can just do on your phone now, but
Yeah.
Of losing. I remember that insecurity or inferiority of losing work because our equipment wasn't good enough. I think that because now we don't lose any work because of our equipment. We have nobody ever comes back and says it's not as nice as the guy down the street. And so I wonder if that little tidbit is take us where we are now.
I think so.
Yeah.
And people have always been people are very, very valuable, but they are our most costly expense category.
Yeah.
And if you got great people and marginal equipment, you still can only do so much.
Yeah, I agree.
But a lot of the investment we've put in is in equipment and finishing equipment that save labor or automates labor.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like
not intentionally to be at the expense of the people we have,
Yeah.
but so that we can do more with
Yeah.
the people we got.
I agree. People like working on good stuff.
Absolutely.
Others that walk around it, which we've learned a lot. Let's talk a little bit about water damage. So we have a couple stories of water damage. There's the first one was. Did you check with Mom what year that was? The pipe burst.
We did one for your birthday.
That's the one I've got. So
Yeah.
the pipe flooded. Or go ahead, tell that story.
I was in place 96 and it had perimeter heating on every floor, hot
Yeah.
water heat. Fed by a 2-inch steam pipe,
Yeah.
or a hot water pipe, which happened to go through the ceiling of the plenum space
Yeah.
on the main floor. Well, there was a coupler in there that burst, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So everybody was at work, and there was a tremendous bang. And in about 2 seconds, all of our ceilings collapsed.
I remember Jen screaming.
Jen sat right underneath that room.
Yeah.
She came running out of there. Yeah. Yeah. Came running out of there like a pipe burst.
Yeah.
And
Man, it was a lot of water.
oh, yeah, it was on top of everything, and I was running through the office, you know, pulling plugs out of power bars, and, you know, in ankle deep water.
You could tell that you paid the bills at that time because I remember I went and got the guy from the lobby, the building guy,
Yeah.
which was important. But your first reaction was to unplug equipment and start pushing it away because you paid. You know how much that
Yeah.
stuff was worth.
Yeah.
So I remember you're pushing it all out,
Yeah, and we had 2, 3.
and it was my birthday.
Yeah, we didn't know what else to do for your birthday.
It was October 20th.
Yeah, so we opened the doors.
What year was it?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Or 2004 or 5, somewhere
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
The closest doors were the side doors that went out to the LRT.
Yeah.
So we opened those, and we had a waterfall exiting our space into the stream of people that were
Yeah.
coming out
Steam
of the building.
everywhere.
Yeah, steam.
Hot water.
Steam coming
It was
out
cold
of
and
the
stuff.
space. Yeah. We had the firemen there right away.
Yeah.
And they were squeegeeing and getting stuff out of there for us as well.
I do remember the building guy. I remember the big guy, big young guy. I don't
Yeah.
remember his name, but he went right up a ladder, right into the hot water. tried to stop it.
Yeah, there,
It's crazy.
duct tape was not going to fix this when it was under pressure. Unfortunately, the building managers had just changed the building operator,
Yeah.
so he wasn't familiar with where the shutoffs were,
Right.
and it took him a while. I don't know how long the burst
Yeah.
was flowing, but I think it was close to an hour.
An hour. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was in our file room.
Yeah.
all in supplies.
All of our supplies, toner was just the boxes were just disintegrating.
We had a lot of coil binding,
Mm.
all sorts of crap.
All those boxes just kind of disintegrated. We had basically parts, flowing out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, my file cabinet was open, and all our financial records and whatnot were
Washed
just
away.
pummeled with water. So whatever year that was, Revenue Canada, if you're looking for those records, they're decoupaged. Sorry.
A lot of that.
Yeah.
So one thing I always admire now that I'm older, but I figured that that was like 10 in the morning or 9 in the morning that happened.
Yeah.
It was my birthday, and I was in my early 20s. So I thought it seems like a good reason to go home. We didn't go
No,
home.
we didn't go home.
You had the Wellsite Geology printing set up. You got Golder to give us space in one of their boardrooms. We brought up all that equipment up there.
Again, it was the third floor,
Yeah, it was.
and it was still in that period where it wasn't occupied, but there was a data closet on that floor, so